The dust of centuries hung over the silent ruins, veiling towers that once reached for the sky. Broken spires jutted like the bones of titans, eroded by wind and time, their surfaces etched with symbols no one alive could read. The archaeologists who walked the silent streets felt small against the scale of what lay before them. This was not the work of a forgotten colony or a minor outpost. The remains spoke of a civilization that had ruled stars, commanded fleets, and shaped worlds. Yet no records in any archive named them. Dr. Lion Caro brushed sand from a carved wall and traced the faint grooves with gloved fingers. The inscription had resisted translation for weeks, as if the language itself resisted being remembered. But the team's newest algorithms finally produced a phrase, chilling in its simplicity. We should not have awakened them. The words passed through the expedition like a shadow. Campfires grew quiet, conversations ended abruptly, and unease spread among those who had traveled light years in search of forgotten knowledge. The younger researchers joked nervously that them must have referred to ancient monsters or rogue machines, but the veterans did not laugh. They knew civilizations powerful enough to build cities like these did not vanish because of ghosts. As reports flowed back to the Terran archives, interest grew across the colonies. Historians argued late into the night. Who were the vanished ones? Why had not even their names survived? Humanity had encountered dozens of species since stepping beyond Sol, each one proud of its history and identity. None had ever erased themselves so completely that even fragments of their memory were gone. Admiral Yates, commander of the Sol Defense Council, reviewed the first compiled dossier with a frown. The patterns unsettled him. Data caches from alien allies showed corrupted entries in their histories, like torn pages from a book. Entire centuries were scrubbed clean, replaced with silence. The gaps aligned with humanity's first age of expansion, the time when Earth's colonies were still fragile and untested. It was as though someone had chosen to hide an entire war. In the mess halls of the frontier fleets, whispers began. Some said the ruins belonged to an arrogant empire that had tried to dominate humanity, only to fall in the attempt. Others claimed the silence was self-imposed, that the species had destroyed itself rather than live under human shadow. No theory satisfied everyone, but one truth spread through the ranks like wildfire. Whatever had happened, humanity had survived and the other side had not. Dr. Caro could not shake the feeling that the ruins were more than relics. She spent her nights staring at the inscription she had uncovered, hearing the words echo in her mind. We should not have awakened them. Who had been awakened? What fury had they called down upon themselves? She wondered if humanity had already stepped into a role it did not yet understand. The galaxy, meanwhile, grew uneasy. Diplomatic envoys from allied species avoided the subject. When questioned about the gaps in their histories, they turned pale, their voices tightening. "It is not spoken of," one ambassador whispered. "You are better not knowing." Another left the chamber without answering at all. The avoidance was more revealing than any confession. Fear had carved its own silence into the fabric of galactic memory. On the far edges of human territory, traders told stories in hushed tones. They spoke of species that once mocked humans, declaring them short-lived, reckless, and unworthy of spaceflight. Those species no longer existed, their names never taught, their worlds never charted. The stories contradicted each other, but all shared the same ending. The vanished ones had tested humanity, and they had lost so completely their name was erased from time. Standing beneath the crumbling towers of the ruined city, Dr. Caro felt both awe and dread. Humanity was a young power, still climbing toward its destiny, but already the galaxy seemed to tremble at its shadow. If these ruins were truly the work of a species that had dared to provoke her kind, then the lesson was clear. The galaxy remembered the cost, even if the name of the fallen had been forgotten. The archaeologists packed their tools and prepared to leave the dead world behind. The towers loomed silently, their warnings etched in stone. Above them, stars burned in endless night, each one a witness to events lost to history. Humanity would not rest until the truth was uncovered, but in the silence of those ruins, one truth already whispered across the cosmos. No one provokes humanity and survives to be remembered. The corridors of the Terran Central Archive hummed softly with the sound of machines sifting through millennia of accumulated data. Endless rows of quantum cores glowed like constellations trapped within glass, each storing fragments of history from every corner of the galaxy. Here, humanity kept its truths, its discoveries, and its questions. Lately, one question had begun to consume the archivists. Who were the vanished ones? Lieutenant Commander Mara Vey leaned against the console, watching as old star charts flickered into view. Each bore gaps, entire regions marked with erased annotations, her brow furrowed. "It's deliberate," she murmured. "Someone scrubbed the records." Her colleague, analyst Rendall, adjusted his glasses. "It's more than scrubbed, it's overwritten. Look." He pulled up a sequence of entries from the archives of the Zaith, a species known for obsessive record-keeping. At first glance, the pages looked ordinary: trade agreements, border treaties, migration logs. But the timestamps told another story. For over 100 standard years, nothing meaningful had been recorded. Entire generations were summarized in single, bland phrases: stable, quiet, uneventful. "That's not history," Mara said. "That's fear pretending to be silence." Word of these gaps spread quickly among scholars and military councils alike. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Every known archive across multiple civilizations contained the same hollow century, as if a curtain had been drawn over the stars themselves. The deeper researchers looked, the clearer the timing became. The silence began just as humanity left Sol and planted its first flags on distant soil. Conspiracy theorists flooded the nets with wild claims. Some said humans had unleashed a weapon so devastating that even the memory of it could not be allowed to survive. Others believed the vanished species had struck first and destroyed themselves in the process. Still others whispered that humanity had not been the only force in play, that something older, hidden, and waiting had risen alongside them. Admiral Yates called for a closed meeting of the Sol Defense Council, the chamber filled with generals, ministers, and intelligence directors. Holograms of alien envoys shimmered around the room, their expressions guarded. The Admiral tapped the table. "We've confirmed the erasures aren't random. They're coordinated across species. Every major power has the same gap. It's a conspiracy of silence." The Cathari ambassador, a tall figure with crystalline skin, shifted uncomfortably. "Do not seek answers you are not prepared to accept. Some truths protect more than they harm." Yates leaned forward. "With respect, Ambassador, humanity does not hide from truth. If a species provoked us and vanished, then we have a responsibility to know why." The chamber buzzed with tension. Finally, an elder representative of the Chal, a race known for their longevity, spoke in a trembling voice. "There was one who challenged you, one who believed you could be tamed. They are no more, and for the sake of all, they are never to be named." The words hung heavy in the air. The aliens refused to elaborate. Within hours, their holograms faded, leaving humanity alone with its questions. Across the colonies, the whispers only grew. Soldiers on distant outposts repeated rumors that the enemy had once been vast, spanning dozens of star systems. Miners in asteroid belts told tales of planets scoured to ash by Terran fleets. No one knew the details, but everyone agreed on the conclusion. Humanity had been tested, and in response had given no quarter. Back at the ruins, Dr. Caro replayed the inscription again and again. She began to suspect the warning was not just about the past, it was about the future. What if the galaxy's silence was not meant to protect humanity, but to protect everyone else from humanity's potential? In the archives, Mara Vey uncovered a final clue. Buried deep in corrupted files, she found a single fragmented sentence left like a scar in the data. It read, "Do not provoke the Terrans. The cost is more than extinction." She leaned back in her chair, chills crawling down her spine. The words suggested a fate worse than death, but what fate could be worse than erasure? The answer, she realized, lay not in the ruins nor in the erased histories, but in humanity itself. Perhaps the galaxy feared not a weapon, nor a secret ally, but the simple, terrifying truth of what humanity became when pushed too far. And if that were true, then the vanished ones had not only provoked the wrong species, they had awakened the only force in the galaxy that could wipe them from existence and from memory. Long before the ruins turned to dust, before names were erased from history, humanity was still young among the stars. The first Terran colonies were fragile, strung like fragile beads across the void, small habitats on barren moons, domes on red deserts, orbiting stations around distant suns. They were hopeful, ambitious, and unprepared for the notice of older powers. The notice came anyway. The Varith, though their name would not survive the centuries, saw humanity's expansion as an insult. To them, the stars were already divided, every territory spoken for, every species assigned its place in the cosmic hierarchy. They had ruled for thousands of years, convinced of their superiority. When their long-range scouts discovered the Terrans building ships from salvaged alloys and mining raw worlds with crude machines, they sneered. To the Varith, humans were children trespassing in an empire too vast for them to comprehend. At first, the Varith sent envoys, their words dripping with false kindness. They offered protection, demanded tribute, and insisted humanity cease all independent colonization. In return, they promised safety under their rule. The humans of Earth and Mars listened politely. Then they refused. It was not arrogance. It was not even defiance. It was simply humanity's nature. Earth's people had fought for freedom too often to bow again. Mars had been carved from desert by stubborn hands, not gifted by anyone's benevolence. The colonies echoed the same resolve. They would not kneel. The Varith took refusal as insult. Their fleets descended on the outer colonies with shimmering warships, bristling with weapons humanity had never seen. Settlements were bombarded, skies darkened by plasma fire. Entire stations burned in orbit, their remains scattering like ash across the void. To the Varith, it was not war, it was punishment. But humanity did not break. On Titan, engineers who once designed cargo lifters stripped them down and rebuilt them as missile launchers. On Ganymede, farmers converted irrigation rigs into artillery. On scattered frontier stations, ordinary civilians volunteered for militias, fighting with rifles older than their grandfathers. Where the Varith expected surrender, they found resistance. Where they expected despair, they found fury. Captain Elia's reign of the colony ship Aurora's spear led one of the first counterstrikes. His vessel had no proper weapons, only mining drills and improvised rail cannons. Yet when the Varith blockade closed in, he rammed their lead ship and detonated the Aurora's reactors. The explosion gutted the enemy formation, scattering their fleet in disarray. Rain and his crew perished, but his name became a rallying cry. The Varith warlords laughed at such desperation. "They are insects," one commander sneered to his council. "They sting and flail, but they cannot win." They did not understand. Humanity's strength was not in numbers nor in technology. It was in refusal. Every loss only hardened them. Every atrocity carved their resolve deeper. Where one colony fell, two more rose armed with lessons learned. Where one fleet burned, engineers rebuilt with vengeance in their designs. Humanity did not see themselves as insects. They saw themselves as survivors, and survival was a weapon sharper than any plasma cannon. The war spread. What the Varith believed would be a swift pacification dragged into years. Their generals grew frustrated as Terrans adapted faster than predicted, turning weaknesses into strengths. The humans studied captured technology, copied it, and made it unpredictable. They launched raids not to conquer but to disrupt, striking supply lines, ambushing lone ships, disappearing before retaliation could arrive. The Varith called them chaos-born, dismissing their tactics as dishonorable. But slowly they began to lose ground. For the first time in their long history, the Varith felt something unfamiliar: fear. On Earth, President Amara Keen stood before a weary assembly and spoke words that would echo through generations. "They thought we were fragile. They thought we were temporary, but we endure. We are not the prey they imagine. We are the storm they awakened." And in the dark chambers of the Varith High Council, an elder advisor gave a quiet warning: "Do not drive them further, for they will not stop until one of us is gone." But the warlords ignored him. They believed themselves unshakable, eternal. They did not yet know that in provoking humanity, they had sown the seeds of their own erasure. The first sparks of the forgotten war had been lit. Soon, fire would spread across the stars, and the galaxy would witness what happened when Terrans were pushed beyond endurance. The war that began as scattered skirmishes soon stretched across light years. The Varith, confident in their ancient fleets, escalated their campaign. They unleashed weapons that had ended countless rebellions before. Stars were veiled behind curtains of burning gas as they ignited atmospheres. Moons were shattered into dust to deny humans their bases. Worlds that had only just tasted freedom were left scarred and smoking. But humanity did not crumble. Every act of destruction became a spark of fury. The loss of one colony sent 10 more into recruitment drives. Families who had lost everything built munitions with their own hands. Children grew up swearing oaths to carry the fight their parents had begun. The Varith believed they were fighting a limited war. Humanity was fighting for survival, and survival meant nothing short of total commitment. On the frontier, Admiral Helena Kale led a ragtag fleet of converted freighters, mining rigs, and a handful of military cruisers. Against the Varith armada, her fleet should have been crushed. Instead, she fractured her forces into small strike groups, scattering like sparks into the void. They struck convoys, sabotaged fuel depots, and ambushed patrols. They used asteroid fields, dust clouds, and even the radiation of unstable stars to mask their movements. The Vareth called these tactics reckless. To humanity, they were genius. The war soon became a duel of wills. The Vareth commanded order, precision, and overwhelming force. Humanity answered with chaos, improvisation, and an unpredictable fire that no algorithm could contain. Entire colonies turned into fortresses, their skis lit by cannons built from scavenged alloys. Civilians lived underground, not in fear, but in determination. They farmed food in caverns, built weapons in hidden workshops, and launched guerrilla strikes against their occupiers. On Vega's Reach, a farming world, the Vareth leveled entire cities, convinced that the surviving colonists would surrender. Instead, the survivors tunneled into the planet's bedrock, building resistance cells. When the Vareth returned, expecting submission, the ground erupted with mines and rail fire. Vega's Reach became a symbol. Humans did not surrender, not even when buried in ash. Every fleet battle grew fiercer. Terran ships were often outgunned, their hulls thinner and their weapons cruder. Yet they fought with a desperation the Vareth could not comprehend. Where one ship fell, another rammed the enemy at point-blank range. Where a fleet faced annihilation, commanders triggered self-destructions that crippled whole squadrons of enemy warships. To the Vareth, such sacrifice was madness. To humanity, it was necessity. Across the stars, songs spread, songs of defiance, of courage, of vengeance. Soldiers carried them into battle, colonists whispered them in shelters, and children learned them as lullabies. The galaxy took notice. Other civilizations watched silently from the edges of their territories. They had seen rebellions before, but never like this. Never a species so young, so outmatched, yet so unwilling to accept defeat. The Vareth began to realize their mistake. They had believed they were extinguishing sparks. Instead, they had ignited a wildfire. In one of the most decisive moments, Admiral Kale coordinated the first Terran counteroffensive. Using outdated warp drives, she led her fractured fleet in what appeared to be a retreat. The Vareth, eager for decisive victory, pursued into an uncharted system. There, hidden in the shadow of a dying star, humanity's engineers had assembled makeshift orbital platforms armed with rail cannons the size of skyscrapers. As the Vareth fleet arrived, the platforms unleashed their fire. Combined with Kale's ambush, the enemy was torn apart. The system's sky burned for days, debris raining like falling stars. News of the victory spread faster than light. For the first time, the galaxy whispered not of Terran weakness, but of Terran strength. Humanity was no longer a species to be erased, they were a force to be feared. And yet the war was far from over. The Vareth grew more desperate, their strikes more brutal. They unleashed weapons that poisoned ecosystems, leaving planets uninhabitable for centuries. But every horror only deepened humanity's resolve. The war was no longer about territory or independence or pride. It had become something greater. For humanity, it was survival. For the Vareth, it was the beginning of extinction. As the fires of war spread across the stars, one truth became undeniable. The Vareth had awakened something they could not control. Humanity was no longer fighting for colonies. They were fighting for the right to exist. And in that fight, nothing, absolutely nothing, would stop them. The war had raged for years, leaving scars on every front. Stars bore witness to fleets burning in silence, while colonies turned into graveyards of shattered ships. Yet neither side yielded. The Vareth had believed their technology, their discipline, and their long history of conquest would crush humanity. Instead, every act of cruelty only strengthened the Terran resolve. The Vareth High Council grew impatient. Victory had been promised. Their fleets were bleeding, their colonies drained of resources, and their prestige crumbling. For the first time in their recorded memory, doubt whispered through their halls. The warlords decided the time for half measures was over. If humanity would not kneel, then humanity itself must be erased. Their target was Earth. The plan was audacious. A massive fleet, greater than any the Vareth had deployed before, was assembled in secret. Hidden among its vessels was a planet killer, a colossal construct designed to unleash devastation on a scale unseen in centuries. Its purpose was simple: to shatter Earth's crust, ignite its mantle, and reduce the birthplace of humanity into molten ruin. Without Earth, the Vareth believed, the colonies would collapse in despair. But humanity was not blind. Terran intelligence had intercepted fragments of communication. Analysts pieced together enough to know that something catastrophic was coming. Fleets across the colonies were recalled. Civilians were evacuated to bunkers. Factories doubled their output. Every ship, no matter how battered, was summoned to defend the cradle of humanity. The day the Varith fleet arrived, the Sol system blazed with fire. Their armada darkened the skies as it emerged from warp, a tide of steel and light that dwarfed anything humanity had ever faced. The planet killer drifted into position, its engines humming with dreadful energy. On Earth, billions watched the sky, united not in fear but in determination. They knew this was the moment their species would either perish or prove unbreakable. The Terran defense fleet formed a wall before the planet. Ships of every kind held the line, military cruisers, converted freighters, even cargo haulers retrofitted with railguns. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing annihilation. Yet they did not retreat. Admiral Helena Cale's voice echoed across every channel. They think Earth is our weakness. They will learn it is our strength. Today we show them what it means to face humanity. The battle erupted with a fury that shook the void. Varith warships cut through Terran lines, their weapons carving deep into fragile hulls, but the humans fought with reckless courage. Entire wings sacrificed themselves to disable enemy capital ships. Pilots rammed their fighters into cruisers, detonating engines in brilliant bursts of fire. Every time the Varith pressed forward, humanity pushed back harder. The planet killer advanced steadily, shielded by escorts. Its weapon systems began to charge, glowing with destructive power. Humanity's fleet hurled everything they had, but the machine's defenses absorbed the barrage. Then came the turning point. A squadron of Terran frigates, heavily damaged, broke through the enemy lines in a desperate assault. Leading them was Captain Joran Hale aboard the Resolute Dawn. Hale's voice was calm as he transmitted his final message. For Earth, for all of us. The Resolute Dawn rammed the planet killer at full velocity, her reactors detonating in a chain reaction. The explosion tore through the superweapon's core. Fire blossomed across its frame, splitting the colossal construct in two. The fragments tumbled into the void, silent but final. The sight ignited a roar across the Terran fleet. Morale surged and the battle turned. Humanity struck with renewed ferocity, forcing the Varith into retreat. Their armada, once so confident, fractured and scattered. For the first time, the great conquerors tasted absolute defeat. Earth had survived, but survival came at a cost. Wreckage drifted across the Sol system, monuments to the courage and sacrifice of thousands. Yet the people did not mourn in despair. They mourned with pride, for their dead had secured the future of their species. In the aftermath, the Terran Council gathered. There was no question of peace. The Varith had sought to erase humanity's heart. Humanity would answer with finality. The decision was made. The war would not end until the Varith were no more. The galaxy would learn what happened when humans were driven to the edge. And the Varith, once masters of countless worlds, would soon face the storm they had unleashed. The destruction of the planet killer marked a turning point. What the Varith had believed would be humanity's grave became their own downfall. In the halls of Terran leadership, grief hardened into resolve. The war was no longer about defense, no longer about survival. It was about ending the threat forever. The Terran fleets, once scattered and defensive, transformed into engines of retribution. Shipyards across Mars, Luna, and Titan produced warships at a pace thought impossible. Colonies that had once scraped by on meager resources poured everything into the war effort. Scientists, engineers, and even artists turned their minds to one purpose, ensuring the Varith never threatened humanity again. The counteroffensive began with fire. Terran fleets surged beyond their borders, striking deep into Varith territory. Every colony, every outpost, every supply line was targeted. The Varith, once so confident in their superiority, found themselves overwhelmed by human unpredictability. Where they expected straightforward assaults, they faced feints and ambushes. Where they prepared for diplomacy, they met only silence. Humanity had no intention of negotiating. On the Varith world of Thalos Prime, a proud capital of their empire, resistance lasted for days. Orbital defenses blazed and entire cities fought to repel the Terrans. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but ash and silence. It became the pattern of the war. Human fleets did not occupy, they erased. The galaxy watched in stunned horror. Other species had seen wars before, but never a campaign of such finality. The Varith pleaded for alliances, but none came. Old rivals refused to intervene, too fearful of sharing their fate. Even long-standing allies turned their backs, unwilling to provoke humanity's wrath. For the first time in history, the Varith stood alone. And humanity pressed forward without hesitation. Every atrocity committed by the Varith was repaid tenfold. Where they had poisoned atmospheres, humanity burned entire worlds. Where they had enslaved colonies, humanity shattered fleets and left the survivors to drift in silence. Terran captains carried no banners, only the memory of Earth under siege. Their orders were simple: leave nothing that could rise again. The Varith Council fractured under the weight of defeat. Some begged for surrender, others demanded retaliation, but none could agree. By the time they realized their empire was collapsing, it was already too late. Their fleets were in ruins, their colonies gone dark, their people scattered and broken. The final blow came with chilling efficiency. A coalition of Terran fleets descended upon Varith Prime itself, the jewel of their empire. The battle raged for hours, then days, as the defenders threw everything into the void. But humanity had already decided the outcome. One by one, the planetary shields fell, the orbital platforms shattered, and the proud cities burned. When the smoke cleared, the Varith were no more. Not conquered, not enslaved, erased. The silence that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. It spread like a shadow, chilling every star system. Civilizations whispered to one another of what they had witnessed. The Terrans had not only survived, they had annihilated one of the oldest and most powerful empires in existence. But what unsettled the galaxy most was what happened afterward. Humanity did not boast. They did not raise monuments to victory or demand tribute. Instead, they simply erased the Varith from memory. Records of their name, their worlds, their history, all deleted, all purged. To speak of them became taboo. The act was deliberate. Humanity wanted no echo, no remembrance, no fragment of the Varith to linger. To remember was to give them meaning. To forget was to make their extinction absolute. Across the stars, alien councils debated the meaning of this silence. Some argued it was mercy, an attempt to spare future generations from the memory of war. Others insisted it was terror incarnate, a warning to any who might consider repeating the Varith's mistake. Regardless, the lesson was clear. Do not provoke the Terrans. On distant colonies, children grew up hearing stories of the silent extinction, though no names were ever given. Soldiers spoke of it in mess halls, ambassadors in hushed tones. The ruins left behind became monuments not of the Varith, but of what happened when humanity was driven to the edge. And so the galaxy held its breath. For the first time in millennia, the stars were silent, not with peace but with fear. Generations passed, but the silence left in the wake of the Varith's destruction lingered. Humanity expanded further than ever before, charting new systems, building thriving colonies, and forging trade with distant civilizations. Yet beneath the prosperity, a shadow remained. The Varith had been erased so thoroughly that no human child could speak their name. Not even the oldest databases contained a reference. And yet, the story endured. It lived in whispers, in fragments of song, in the unspoken tension that filled every diplomatic chamber when Terrans entered. The silent extinction, as the galaxy came to call it, had become legend. On the colony world of Daedalus, young cadets gathered in an academy courtyard, staring up at a mural depicting humanity's early wars. The images showed burning colonies, Terran fleets rising, and stars lit by fire. But there was a gap in the mural, a deliberate void where the enemy should have been painted. One cadet, eyes sharp with curiosity, finally asked the question that had haunted countless generations. Who were they? The instructor, an aging veteran, studied the mural for a long moment before answering. It does not matter who they were. What matters is that they thought they could break us, and now their name is not worth remembering. The cadets nodded solemnly. Some accepted the answer, others did not. Yet the lesson was clear. Humanity had faced annihilation once, and they had answered with such fury that even memory could not survive it. Elsewhere in the galaxy, alien scholars debated the silent extinction in hushed tones. Some insisted that humans had gone too far, that erasing an entire species from history was an act of cruelty beyond measure. Others disagreed, pointing to the simple truth: the galaxy had not seen such a war since. Fear, they argued, was the greatest peacekeeper. In the council chambers of the Zaith Republic, an ambassador once dared to speak openly. Humanity is dangerous, he warned. They may not strike without cause, but when provoked, they destroy. We must never forget what they did to the nameless ones. His words echoed through the chamber, and no one challenged him. Even those who had never fought the Terrans felt the weight of the silence. Merchant guilds refused to cheat Terran traders. Border patrols gave wide berth to human ships. Diplomats measured every word, careful not to offend. It was not reverence that held them in check, but something deeper, something colder. Humanity itself had grown uneasy with the legend. On Earth, memorials to the war bore no names of the enemy, only the faces of fallen Terrans. The elders told their children, "Remember our courage, not theirs." Yet questions remained. Was it right to erase an entire people? Was humanity safer for it, or had they crossed a line that could never be undone? Dr. Lion Caro, older now and still haunted by the ruins she had uncovered in her youth, gave lectures on the war. She never spoke the enemy's name, she did not know it, but she often repeated the inscription that had started it all. We should not have awakened them. When her students asked what it meant, she always gave the same reply. It means that when humanity is pushed, we rise, and when we rise, nothing can stand against us. The galaxy heard the same lesson. For centuries after, no species dared provoke the Terrans directly. Border disputes ended with apologies, not wars. Treaties bent in humanity's favor. In time, Terrans became not just respected, but feared as arbiters of balance. Entire empires shifted their policies simply to avoid drawing Terran attention. Yet the silence carried a cost. Humanity's allies never truly trusted them. Friendships with other species remained cautious, never reaching the depth humanity longed for. They admired Terran resilience, yes, but they also remembered the nameless void left behind, a warning etched into every star map. One evening on a colony orbiting Epsilon Eridani, a child asked her grandfather why no one remembered the enemy. The old man sighed, gazing out at the stars. "Because names give power," he said softly, "and they earned none. Their legacy is not in who they were, but in what they made us become." The child thought for a moment, then nodded. She did not understand fully, but she felt the weight in his words. Thus the story endured, not in books, not in monuments, but in silence. The greatest lesson humanity ever taught the galaxy was not spoken aloud. It was carried in every wary glance, every respectful pause, every memory of what had once been provoked and then erased. The silent extinction had become humanity's shadow, and the galaxy's greatest warning. The ruins lay quiet beneath a sky dusted with stars, the wind carrying whispers through broken spires. Centuries had passed since fire consumed the Varith, yet their once-proud cities still stood in fragments. Crumbling walls, half-buried statues, and hollowed-out towers stretched as far as the eye could see, a silent monument to a people whose very name had been erased. A team of Terran explorers stood among the rubble, their suits glowing faintly in the fading light. Dr. Lion Caro's Protege gaze had returned where she once walked. Younger, eager, and less burdened by the silence, they scanned every stone, hopping for some trace of the forgotten. "Professor," one of the students said through the comm, "we found another inscription. The language, it's fragmented but readable." The group gathered around as the translation software flickered to life. The carved words appeared on their visors, incomplete but clear enough to chill the heart. "They came with fire, they came with fury. We thought them fragile, we were wrong." Silence followed. No one dared speak. Though they had all grown up with the legend of the silent extinction, reading the words of the fallen felt different. It was no longer a story passed down through generations. It was truth, carved into stone by desperate hands. Finally, one of the students whispered, "Why do we still hide their name? Why not let history remember what happened here?" The expedition leader, Commander Alen Varos, considered carefully before answering. Her voice carried the weight of centuries. "Because remembering them gives them power. Their deeds ended here, but ours continue. Humanity does not share its stage with those who tried to end it." The students nodded, though unease lingered in their eyes. They had inherited the silence without fully understanding it, and standing in the ruins made that silence feel heavier than ever. As they worked, recording artifacts and mapping the remains, Varos paused to look toward the horizon. For a moment she imagined what this world must have been when it thrived. Cities alive with music, ships soaring through skies, children laughing in the streets. All of it gone, not because they were weak, but because they believed humanity could be broken. A message came through from orbit. The Terran ship above had intercepted a transmission, an alien vessel approaching, crewed by a species known for cautious diplomacy. They requested permission to land. Minutes later, a delegation arrived at the ruins. Their leader, a tall figure with luminous eyes, bowed respectfully before speaking. "We come not to disturb, but to observe. This place," He hesitated, glancing at the towering remnants, is not spoken of among our kind, yet we had to see it with our own eyes. Varros studied him. You know what happened here? The alien's gaze hardened. We know enough. They thought to conquer you. They vanished. We fear and we remember, even if you do not. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Humanity might have erased the Varith from their own memory, but the galaxy carried the shadow still. That night, as the team camped beneath the shattered towers, Varros recorded her report. We stand where arrogance ended and endurance prevailed. The ruins remind us of what was lost, but also of what was born, the unity, the fire, the determination that still defines us. The enemy's name is unremembered, but their mistake is carved into the stars. No one provokes humanity twice. Her voice trailed into silence. Around the camp, the young explorers lay awake, staring at the ruins. Some felt pride, others sorrow, but all understood that they were witnessing not just history, but a warning. In the centuries that followed, stories of the silent extinction would continue. Children would still ask why the enemy's name was gone, and elders would still reply, because it was not worth keeping. But here, in the ruins, those who listened closely could almost hear the echo of the inscription's final truth. They should not have awakened us. And with that, the explorers packed their equipment and departed, leaving the ruins to the silence of the stars. The wind carried dust over the broken stones, burying them a little deeper, ensuring that in time even these fragments might vanish. The galaxy would never know their name. But it would always remember the lesson.